Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi responded to Trump's Oval Office address. Of course, Trump spoke about the border wall and how it's this big crisis and we got to address it and the Democrats are being unreasonable. Well, let's take a listen to part of their response here, and then I'll break it down.
Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to speak directly to the American people tonight about how we can end this shutdown and meet the needs of the American people. Sadly, much of what we heard from President Trump throughout this senseless shutdown has been full of misinformation and even malice. The president has chosen fear. We want to start with the facts. The fact is, on the very first day of this Congress, House Democrats passed Senate Republican legislation to reopen government and fund smart, effective border security solutions. But the president is rejecting these bipartisan bills which would reopen government over his obsession with forcing American taxpayers to waste billions of dollars on an expensive and ineffective wall, a wall he always promised Mexico would pay for. The fact is, President Trump has chosen to hold hostage critical services for the health, safety, and well-being of the American people and withhold the paychecks of 800,000 innocent workers across the nation, many of them veterans. He promised to keep government shut down for months or years, no matter whom it hurts. That's just plain wrong. The fact is, we all agree we need to secure our borders while honoring our values. We can build the infrastructure and roads at our ports of entry. We can install new technology to scan cars and trucks for drugs coming into our nation. We can hire the personnel we need to facilitate trade and immigration at the border. We can fund more innovation to detect unauthorized crossings. The fact is, the women and children at the border are not a security threat. They are a humanitarian challenge, a challenge that President Trump's own cruel and counterproductive policies have only deepened. And the fact is, President Trump must stop holding the American people hostage, must stop manufacturing a crisis, and must reopen the government. Thank you. Leader Schumer?
Thank you, Speaker Pelosi. My fellow Americans, we address you tonight for one reason only. The President of the United States, having failed to get Mexico to pay for his ineffective, unnecessary border wall, and unable to convince the Congress or the American people to foot the bill, has shut down the government. American democracy doesn't work that way. We don't govern by temper tantrum. No president should pound the table and demand he gets his way, or else the government shuts down, hurting millions of Americans who are treated as leverage. Tonight, and throughout this debate and throughout his presidency, President Trump has appealed to fear, not facts, division, not unity. Make no mistake, Democrats and the president both want stronger border security. However, we sharply disagree with the president about the most effective way to do it. So, how do we untangle this mess? Well, there's an obvious solution. Separate the shutdown from arguments over border security. There is bipartisan legislation supported by Democrats and Republicans to reopen government while allowing debate over border security to continue.
You know, it's really easy to see why their approval ratings are so low. They're not good politicians. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, they don't know how to work a crowd. They don't know how to give a speech. By the way, they have a 26% and 28% approval rating, respectively. Donald Trump, even though he's not that well-liked a president, is about 40%. So his approval rating is well above and beyond that of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. And you could see it here. They're not good politicians. Now, are they right on like the core point that Trump is holding 800,000 government workers hostage? Yes. And in fact, it's kind of misleading to even call this a partial government shutdown, because if you go through the list of the things that are impacted by it and the things that are not impacted by it, it's basically like a list that's a Republican's wet dream, an elected Republican, I should say. where all the things that are experiencing the cuts and the lack of funding, it's all like programs for working people. And all the things that the Republicans adore, they're not experiencing the impacts of the government shutdown. So we have a great video later that kind of highlights this, where all the bobbleheads on Fox News are acting like, I don't even feel it. I don't even feel it. Yeah, dipshit, because you're a fucking multimillionaire, and you and everybody in your social circle and every part of the government you care about, like the military, it's not impacted. Or it's not. I should be clear. It's not impacted as much as other areas are impacted. So that's why Trump is willing to hold the government hostage and hold these programs hostage and hold these workers hostage, because honestly, overwhelmingly, the people impacted by this are left-leaning. They vote Democratic. So Trump doesn't give a shit. They're not going to vote for me anyway, so how about I just hold them hostage and try to use it as leverage to get my wall? So I think Chuck and Nancy are actually right on the core part of it, but there's a giant problem with their response, apart from them having just like zero charisma and just not... They just seem elitist and out of touch, you know? Like, there are memes now going around where you see Chuck and Nancy standing next to each other, and it's like, son, we're not mad at you, we're just disappointed. Because they give you that vibe. That vibe of like, we're the stern parents and, tut, son. And it's just not a good look for politicians. But here's the biggest fail. They don't weave a counter narrative. So what Trump does is, and understand, his narrative is wrong. Like, I want to be clear about that. But what Trump says is, hey, all you people out there who are struggling, well, it's okay because I figured out why you're struggling. You're struggling because these goddamn undocumented immigrants come in the country and they're committing crime and they're ruining your towns and they're driving your wages down and there's fucking jobs being outsourced as a direct result of it. And there's this fucking narrative where if you're somebody who's hurting, you're looking for answers. And Trump is giving you a answer. It's a bad answer. It's a scapegoating answer. But he's giving you a answer. Now, compare that with the Democrats. What are the Democrats doing? Oh, God, Mr. President, you sure have said some wrong things, sir. I want to come here to give you the facts, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so there's some usefulness in poking holes in his arguments. I'm pro fact-checking, and in fact, the last segment, I just kind of broke down his entire segment in that sense. But you're a politician. It's not enough to just say the other guy's wrong. You have to say, hey, he's wrong, and I'm right, and here's my argument. Trump's argument is, oh my God, there's this scandal, there's this crisis, and all your problems, they could be tied back either directly or indirectly in a roundabout way to the undocumented immigrants. So what's your counter narrative? You can't just say, oh God, he's so wrong, and he's very mean-spirited. And then, because what they don't do is give what the left counter narrative actually is, which is what? Donald Trump and a bunch of plutocrats and oligarchs, they do the oldest trick in the book, which is divide people along racial lines so they don't realize that the real conflict in society is a class conflict. They don't realize that Wall Street and billionaires and the people and corporations and the people who bought the government, they're running out the back door with all the money while they try to muck up a fight between middle-class white people and poor people of color. That's the oldest trick in the book. Elites divide workers as they run out the back door with all the money, and then as long as it's divide and conquer, get them to fight amongst each other and blame each other for their problems, and I'm gonzo with all the cash, dude, and all the power. And they're not building that case. Why? Because let's face it, they're part of that elite circle. They're part of the plundering plutocrats. So they're not gonna weave a narrative that's based on class. They're not gonna do it because they're part of that upper class. So instead, they have no counter narrative. They can't say, listen, Trump is right that there's a lot of fucking problems in this country and that you're struggling. But here's the real answer. The real answer is our government has been bought by multinational corporations, billionaires, and elites, and they've rigged the rules against you and in their favor. So it's not the fault of the poor brown person that has, no less money than you do and absolutely no power. It's not their fault that you're struggling. I can tell you whose fault it is. And then you walk them through it. Hey, here's exactly how the government was rigged. Here's how they made the laws against you and in their favor. Here's how they outsource all the jobs. Here's how they shove all their money in offshore tax havens and shift the tax burden onto you. They can't weave that narrative because they're indicted in that narrative. So that's why you have these fucking weak responses where it's like, oh, Mr. President, you're so wrong and you're so mean. I'm going to poke holes in your argument. See, I just did it. But there has to be an end then. Nobody likes the fucking stuck-up parent who comes in the room and says, you're wrong, and then doesn't explain or offer a counter-narrative or, make things clear. So this obsession with fact-checking, it's like, it actually in a weird way has been detrimental because it stops Democrats from proposing their own worldview and their own vision and their own narrative. They just get to stop short at the other guy's wrong, I'm going to poke holes in it. That's not enough. You need more than that. You're only doing half of what's necessary. So, not good. But the upside is they are holding strong on the wall, and Trump is getting more and more desperate. And there's even if Chuck and Nancy were like, okay, fine, we'll authorize some funding for the wall, it's a Democratic House. And they're not going to, it's not going to, even if you get all the Republicans and like a handful of Democrats, you're not going to get the wall through. So Trump is really left with no option but to do what's probably unconstitutional, which is declare a national emergency and authorize funding without approval. So we're at an impasse here, man. We're at an impasse. And they are right on the core point, which is, no, we're not going to do your bidding. We're not going to do that, at least on this particular issue. And I actually this is a rare issue where I'm not opposed to the policy initiatives of the establishment Democrats, because I consider myself somewhat moderate on the issue of the border, and what they're proposing is pretty moderate. They're saying, okay, we'll give you money for border security, but it's not going to be your fucking wall. And we want things in return. We want a deal for on DACA. We want a deal for a path to citizenship. All right, we'll get some shit done. I mean, if you really want to negotiate and you really want to get shit done, throw out there the real, like, hardcore lefty proposals. Throw Medicare for all in the mix. Throw living wage in the mix and have a real negotiation. But they're, of course, not going to do that. But there you have it. That's Chuck and Nancy's response. And I haven't seen numbers on how Trump's Oval Office address was received and how their response was received, but I know because of the numbers already that Trump is not liked in the country, nor are Chuck and Nancy.